They are bringing their taxis, which are jalopisi koroko. Our grandmothers are suffering of talama plastic, and they are forced to go to bangene kuma taxi angeko endleleni right.
A lot of taxi drivers don't even have licenses. You understand? They're operating like just in Angena, we are driving taxi, and that's putting people's lives at risk.
Impounding taxis that don't have a permit, I feel is pretty fair in the same time, but then also in the same time, just taking it without like giving them a warning is also kind of unfair because that's people's livelihoods.
They are very stagnant on the fact that they can claim everything.
If I must have a valid license, this too, why shouldn't they have one too?
Life is a competition. Everywhere it's competition. It's like a jungle. It's either you eat or you get eaten. You understand?
If I want to pay for the convenience of using an Uber, it should be like that, and there shouldn't be any fights against that. The same way, if I want to use a taxi, I will use a taxi.
Public transport very much in sharp focus. It's topical, and it starts right now. Very good evening to you, South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Hermanus, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight will pop up shortly. Remember, our digital audience is made up of members of the public who have expressed a keen interest in our topic of discussion. So we invite them to be part of the show, to observe, as well as to ask some questions to our guests. So please do raise your virtual hand and do my very best to get you on air, get your questions on air. It's important. Now, millions of South Africans, they rely on public transport to get to work, to get back home. I was looking at the 2020 National Household Travel Survey. Taxis accounted for most public transport users, with over 80% of workers at the time, right? The survey has stated that there was a general increase in households who used a taxi at that time from 9.8 million to over 11 million. Big numbers, right? So when there is uncertainty or disruption in this sector, important sector, it's a big deal. That's why we are throwing the spotlight on the issues facing this industry. You saw the reports, the taxi strike or shutdown in Durban being called off, the impounding of taxis. It's topical. What can we learn from this week's events on the possible way forward? That leads us to the question of the week, and we ask you, what are your thoughts on the current state of the taxi industry in South Africa? It's a simple question, but as always, it might come with some complicated answers. We'd love to hear your thoughts at SABC News_TV. Let's walk and talk, get you some context as always. Head over to the magic wall. What are the frustrations on the ground? In terms of government intervention, what is needed at this point to put paid to the problems? We'd love to hear your thoughts at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get you context. And as always, turn to the magic wall, what we know and why it matters. My guest tonight is transport law specialist Rudolph Mabekte. He joins me now live. Rudolph, thank you so much for your time. We need to understand the situation on the ground. But first, set the scene for us and give us a sense of how valuable the taxi industry in particular is to South Africans.
The taxi industry is very valuable.
Right.
In fact, as you correctly indicated, that the stats indicate how much is being transported by the taxi industry.
Right.
That's very key. And it is being transported without being subsidized. And secondly, it reaches practically every area in the country. If there's transport, it's most likely to be the taxi industry that is operating there. Right. That's how important it is.
Talk to us about data-driven planning. And what do we know in terms of the industry's profitability?
Okay, the data-driven planning, unfortunately, is one of the most lacking. In terms of the law, the National Land Transport Act, the municipalities all over the country have a responsibility for integrated transport planning.
Yeah.
And that planning is supposed to include surveys, up-to-date surveys of what is available in terms of the transport operations in each area, and also what are the needs for transport in each of the areas. And that it's supposed to then move to the provincial level.
Right.
And the provincial level, the provinces are supposed to be using that data that's collected in terms of the integrated transport plans to develop provincial land transport framework.
Right.
And that is supposed to constitute the planning for the province.
Yes.
But unfortunately, the majority of municipalities throughout the country are lacking, very much behind in terms of the ITPs.
And what's the consequences of that?
The consequences, the lack of planning means we are moving blind because we don't know the needs of the country and we can't plan. And those ITPs are also critical for the municipalities to get funding to perform their transport functions.
Right, right.
And because they are not there, and therefore they are not used, the municipalities are unable to get the necessary funding because of their lack of planning.
Is there better data for instance, the e-hailing sector?
Not as far as I know. Remember, the e-hailing sector, firstly, it's a new sector.
Right.
And secondly, because of the fact that in practice, regulation always follow the practice. Things, technology comes in, like we are seeing also with crypto and other things. Technology comes in, and only later the regulators then decide to regulate.
Right.
And that has been the case with the e-hailing. Since it started in 2013, it's only now, that last year, that an act that includes the formal regulation was passed and was signed by the president, and the regulations are done. They should be coming into effect at any time soon.
Are we expecting this, though, to be the silver bullet, the regulation, to change, fundamentally change things on the ground?
The regulations are not the silver bullet. Let me start by saying what government has done in the interim period whilst waiting for this formal regulation of the e-hailing service. They issued a practice note to all the provincial regulatory entities that issue the operating licenses that because the e-hailing service is provided as a pre-booked system, then in terms of the current law, without being changed with the new amendments, there are two sections that the practice note indicated must be used by the provincial regulatory entities. Section 66, that is the section that deals with the licensing of meter taxis. And that section provides also for pre-booking.
Right.
And then there's section 67 that deals with the chartered services. That also includes pre-booking.
Right.
So those two sections were used by the National Department to develop a practice note to say the provincial regulatory entities must use that in the meantime. And which means effectively in terms of the law, there is no gap.
Right.
But what the new law has done, which has introduced a section 66 capital A, specifically to regulate e-hailing, that section now requires a platform, the e-hailing platform, which is not what is provided for in the National Land Transport Act at the moment.
Right.
And it deals then with the e-hailing platform as well as e-hailing service.
Right. It sounds good on paper, but you know that there are issues with regards to the taxi industry, some up on your screen now. The biggest one of all comes here, where people say that they're substandard services. These laws, as I say, sounds good on paper, but is it going to change anything over here, especially for the end user?
It's unlikely to change because I think the most critical element, especially when you deal with a substandard service, is law enforcement.
Yes, yes.
See, without proper law enforcement at all spheres of government, Because in terms of the National Land Transport Act, there's quite a number of bodies that are empowered to be law enforcement. See, there's a definition of authorized officer.
Right.
That includes the SAPS members, the traffic cops at the municipal level, the provincial traffic police,
Right.
the national traffic police, as well as inspectors that are officials that are designated by the MECs in each of the provinces. So there's a lot of warm bodies that should be in a position to enforce.
Right.
But they are practically not available. In fact, in most instances, public transport in the country is enforced mainly by provincial law enforcement that are very few.
In terms of the processing, there's complaints, the impounding of vehicles because of a lack of permits, etc., the pace at which these permits are processed. Where do you see the gaps here?
Okay, the problem with operating licenses, there's a number of problems, and those problems are sitting at a government level, most of them. Because firstly, the law is clear in terms of how the provincial regulatory entities need to deal with applications,
Right.
the timelines, and how they're supposed to respond, and who may apply. But what has happened, most of these provincial regulatory entities decided that they will only deal with applications from minibus and midibus vehicles,
Right.
not recognizing the others. That's a big problem, because then it means the Avanzas and the Ventures and others that are used in the townships cannot be licensed despite the fact that the law allows them to. See, that's number one.
Right.
Number two, in terms of how these applications are dealt with, some of these provincial regulatory entities would receive one application from an individual applying to operate a certain route. But the PRE would want to advertise all the routes of a taxi association that is affected, which gets to be very expensive.
Right.
And as a result, it depletes the funds of the PRE very fast. And in no time, they are unable to continue with receiving applications.
Right.
And therefore creating these huge backlogs that you hear about.
Talk to us, before I let you go, the need. How urgent is the need to formalize the sector?
The need is very urgent, but it's also very important to define what formalization means. You see? Because the meaning of the word formalization means different things to different people.
Right.
Others see formalization as converting the taxi associations into companies. But the taxi operators, as we have them now, they use different types of legal vehicles to operate.
Yeah.
Others operate as sole proprietors as individuals.
Right. Others
have companies that have vehicles that go to as far as about 200 vehicles. So they are already formal. So that's a challenge. But that challenge is not really going to resolve this issue on its own. There's a need to deal with the problems holistically.
Yeah. It needs to be a collective effort.
Yes.
You raised a very important point in terms of formalization. Thank you so much indeed. We needed your better mind, Rudolph. Context, always important. Transport law specialist Rudolph Mabekte, they're giving us his take. Let's get to the crux of the matter. We've lined up a number of guests to get to the bottom of what is the issues on the ground. And joining me in studio, Collen Msibi, the Transport Department's national spokesperson. Thank you very much indeed. Also virtually, we have the South African National Taxi Council's National Public Relations Officer, Mandla Hermanus. Thank you so much. Theo, Malele is the National Taxi Alliance spokesperson. Thank you very much indeed. And Vhatuka Mbelengwa is the head of presidency at the National E-Hailing Federation of South Africa. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Our digital audience as well, please, as I said at the top, raise your virtual hands. We'll get your questions to our guests in a short while. Collen, maybe I can start off with you with regards to this important legislation, the amended the National Land Transport Act regulations. When are we going to see it fully implemented?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. The D-Day is the 12th of this month.
12th of September.
September, which is next Friday. Basically, it comes into effect through gazetting. So that's basically when drama starts. So that's when we're going to have the rollout of the implementation. But of course, as a national department, we've got to work with the provinces so that we are able to assist them in terms of what they need to be doing in terms of the implementation. So we're going to have a roadshow in terms of the workshops in the provinces in the implementation.
When you say you anticipate drama, are you anticipating challenges? Are you anticipating problems once this comes into effect?
Not necessarily. I think it's a matter of saying some of the provinces, for instance, KwaZulu-Natal, the interim dispensation wasn't there. So it's basically starting afresh. Other provinces, they've had the practice note, as Mr. Mabeka said. So they would have to convert those permits or licenses, the meter taxi licenses, into operating licenses for the e-hailing. So it's quite a number of stages that would have to take place. But of course, there is also specific issues that are prescribed in the regulations that needs to happen.
What do you see, Vhatuka, fundamentally changing once these regulations kick in?
Well, we hope that the fundamental change is that we're going to really see an industry transformed and seeing proper controls and oversight measures deployed to ensure that we see a healthy ecosystem emerge. We hope that this round of engagement will be robust and well received. As NEFSA, we intend to participate and we intend to advance some very strong opinions and also agitate for government to implement some serious implementing policy-changing positions. But it's imperative that we get a grip on the situation. It's imperative that we become, that government really does fulfill its role in understanding that they are the custodians of industry. And we can't be reactive. Now, what we're going through is about a decade late, but we must therefore be intentional in projecting a decade ahead in all decisions we're taking. We must ensure that we appreciate that the impact of the global impact of e-hailing is nobody's immune to it. No transportation sector is immune to it. Our minibus taxi industry is not immune to it. Our meter taxis were not immune to it. And we therefore need to offer a response that gives that kind of due consideration that everybody has been impacted. But we must therefore also embrace that technology is what's going to be at the core of our solution. And our government can't resist technology. And I mean technology across the value chain. You know, we need to talk about how we're going to run our taxi rank on a tech-based platform, how we're going to manage the amount of public transport assets that are available in any public economy at any given moment. We need virtual taxi ranks to help us manage the situation so we've got oversight so we can be proactive and not be reactive.
That's an important point. I want to talk about tech disruptions because it's ubiquitous and it's happening the world over. What can we learn going forward? It's an important point. Theo, this notion or the perception of taxi industry versus e-hailing industry, are you hopeful that this regulations will now level the playing field to a point where it's a collective effort going forward? Or are you anticipating we're still having some issues here to iron out?
Yeah, well, good evening and thanks for the opportunity. I think we are hopeful that these regulations would finally bring, the playing fields, to a level status. But we also need to throw in other challenges that one observes as one, goes about on a daily, especially at these nodes, the malls, the shopping centers, that there is a growing illegal operation that is not of e-hailing, that is also not from the meter taxis themselves. There are young people who actually go about looking out for people who are seen to be carrying heavily on their hands. They are being approached and asked as to whether they are in need of transport. And in most cases, these people would say, yes, we need transport. They will be pointed at a particular vehicle. And once they get into this vehicle, then the vehicle driver would also give this person some money,
Right.
and then they will drive off with these people. So this tells you that it is not only the e-hailing or the meter taxis that are within this very space. There are other illegal operations happening.
Right.
But I think this is also poses a challenge to law enforcement agencies. On a daily, taxis have been stopped, but we do not see, most of these e-hailers being flagged for permit-related offences.
I'll come back to that in a short while. I just want to bring in Mandla. From what Theo has said, have you noticed this trend in the industry? Is it one of your concerns? Talk to us about the frustrations on the ground.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been one of the challenges, and we've had many engagements with e-hailing operators, and they sometimes also recognize that there are instances where you find e-hailing operators touting for passengers, especially around the malls, almost like a quasi-rank next to the mall, where it's no longer an app-based operation as we understand it, but there are spotters who go fetch people from the malls and point them to particular vehicles. And also the biggest challenge, the fact that the regulations are only coming in now, it means that space had been a free-for-all. And what is important, because with minibus taxis, you don't just apply and get issued with an operating license. There are surveys to determine the demand and supply to see if that association needs additional operating licenses.
Right.
But at the moment, it's not the case with e-hailing. So anyone can apply. And if you, in fact, even when you don't have an operating license, if you are registered on the app, you can start operating. So there's a need to have a way of managing that from the department side to say, okay, in a particular area, how many e-hailing and metered taxis can we actually have so that it does not become also oversaturated, and then you start seeing tensions between various groups of e-hailing and metered taxis.
Right. Collen, does the amendment tackle this issue of e-hailing drivers getting operational licenses within a specific geographical area?
Well, indeed, what it does, it gives you the area where you should operate, but also the issue that he's raising in terms of the saturation of the industry. The regulations do give the powers to the provincial regulatory authorities to decide on those bases together with government in terms of what should happen where there's more numbers. I mean, the practice in the industry has always been look for profitable routes and all sorts of things. So you would, obviously in this case, it would be profitable areas. So they would have to manage that particular issue. They've got the powers to do so, including the MECs. I do want to also address this issue of the institution like malls, the station, the train stations and so forth. There should be designated areas where people, when you get out of the train, you should be able to go to a specific area where you'd be able to find an e-hailing service. But also it becomes the responsibility of that institution, whether it's a mall or a station, to provide security for people. Otherwise, as he says, people are being pointed to certain direction. Once you know that there's a demarcated area for you, you don't have to be pointed out to somewhere else to go. So you would have to go to that specific area, including the minibus taxis. They've got demarcated area. When you go to Mall of Africa, for instance, it is there.
Right.
So we're looking at that kind of a dispensation. But the issue of saturation, certainly indeed, it will be addressed.
Like many issues in South Africa, Vhatuka, we have great laws on paper, but it's the implementation of these laws that seems to be a challenge. How would you see the industry better being regulated given the new regulations that are going to come into effect?
Look, I think it's important that we begin to correctly diagnose some of the challenges and also begin to highlight that some of the thinking we begin to see from government at times doesn't reflect something that's futuristic enough. When I say diagnose the problems, we first need to on the ground, like the side of problems that Malele and Mr. Hermanus are making reference to, that's reflective of a lack of control. And this is because e-hailing companies like Uber and Bolt, who are absent from dialogues like this, have over-diversified the offering with no controls. We don't know what identifies public transport anymore. You know, a meter taxi had a yellow cap back in the day. Now you don't know what's going to pick you up. You don't know whether it's a two-seater. You don't know whether it's a lawnmower called a Bajaj that's got no safety standards. So as government, we expect that government must begin to then get a grip on this and say, no, you can't have a vehicle that has zero safety standards offering public transportation, but the quantum is built with intent to have fit-for-purpose safety features. You understand? And now you are creating an unhealthy competitive situation between these two. So you need a situation whereby e-hailing is important and there's no resistance to it. You know, the general transportation sector appreciates the offering that it's brought to the forefront. We just need to ensure that we manage it in a manner that ensures that we can all participate properly. So the laws need to express that. We also need government to think beyond a certain demarcation or more providing security. Security starts at the point of controlling the point of entry into industry. So we should be aware, or government should be aware, who's participating first. Not Uber, not Bolt. They can't have the authority to deploy people at will. And for me, it concerns me that our national government does not have the authority to halt this, does not have the authority to instruct them to stop. After all these people have been killed, after all the times we have said, stop the onboarding of vehicles. Because then you look at what's happening all over the country. The minibus taxi industry is being attacked everywhere for stopping vehicles. And you know, I'm not here to defend them. It's wrong. That behavior is incorrect. But the reality is, how do we identify who's a public transport operator anymore? You understand? And we really need government to clarify this.
Theo, I'll get Collen to maybe respond to that in a short while. But you look, government on one end, regulations on one hand, notwithstanding, the two industries also need to take responsibility and talk to each other as well. Is compromise the key word here?
Well, it depends on precisely what we're talking about, you know, because the taxi industry's license or operating licenses rather are specific in that you have a point of origin and a point of destination, a point A and point B. So you have to operate within a specific geographic network. Now, with the regulations of e-hailing that we still need to see as how they would actually operate within our networks, how are they going to affect us? Already they've eaten 40% of our market share. All that we have to do as an industry as well, we just have to be competitive as well and wake up and you know, face the challenges head on.
Right. Mandla, your take in terms of the impounding of taxis and the issues that you are facing on the ground, the issue of the permits, the processing of permits. Give us a sense of the realities on the ground from your perspective.
I think it varies from province to province. There are provinces that have embraced technology and the systems there, they would run faster, but there are provinces that must still catch up. What would be important is for the provinces actually to be able to collaborate, learn from each other. What works in another province might work in the other. And also, there's a role for us as minibus taxi operators, especially primary associations, because we also have a challenge of recruitment where associations continue to recruit members, even though, as my colleague has said there, that our traditional client base is shrinking. So if we continue having more and more members, then it will hurt what we are able to take home at the end of the day. So there's a need for discipline from associations to say, actually, we need to ring fence our membership. We cannot, one year you have 20 members, the next year you've got 50 members. when business is shrinking. So there's a responsibility for the industry as well as for government in terms of dealing, because even when an association has been given operating licenses, if the membership continues to grow, then that association will never have enough operating licenses. By the mere fact that the government can issue 50 operating licenses, in 3 months' time you already have 30 new members that also now need to have operating licenses.
Cornelia, Ntatua, Howard, and Lungile, stand by. I'm going to come to get your questions in a short while. We're also going to touch base with Collen to find out the way forward. And what does formalization of the taxi industry mean? What does it mean when you formalize one of the industries? What does it mean for the e-hailing industry? We'll talk next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical, our question of the week, and we're asking you, what are your thoughts on the current state of the taxi industry in South Africa? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Now, we took to various streets in Gauteng to get your take on this, and this is what you had to say. Take a look.
In everyone's eye, one would assume that the taxi industry does have more power compared to the Uber guys. If the government could really bring the two parties together and then come up with a regulation that will regulate those parties to work together, instead of things turning out the way that they are now.
As black entrepreneurs, I'm a taxi owners and Ubers. But it's okay. You know what? At this particular location, this is where you guys operate, and this particular location, this is where you operate. That's how I see it.
The government should come in and heavily regulate the taxi industry as they do with Uber, because I think Uber is it's also privately owned, and it's also heavily regulated in this country. Because the way you sign up for Uber, I think you have to have a clean criminal record, a professional driving license, and all those stuff. But with taxi, I don't really think they care of that.
When it comes to the transport industry, I think it's very much needed for you to have a permit to do that, because I think it's something about kidnappings and all that stuff. So then without a permit, you wouldn't be able to operate with those type of things. So impounding taxis that don't have a permit, I feel is pretty fair in the same time, but then also in the same time just taking it without giving them a warning is also kind of unfair, because that's people's livelihoods.
They are very stagnant on the fact that they can claim everything. I feel like if we can all work together just by agreeing and stop being stereotypical or discriminative about where people should go, because initially there is competition everywhere. So I feel like if they embrace the fact that there is competition, everything is going to be okay.
Taxi drivers tend to have this thing of, we can't carry your load. It's either you pay for it. So if I want to pay for the convenience of using an Uber, it should be like that, and there shouldn't be any fights against that.
A lot of the taxi drivers don't even have licenses. You understand? They're operating just in Yangena, we are driving taxis, and that's putting people's lives at risk. Why are you transporting passengers if you are not legally allowed to? You understand? Because what happens if you get an accident, or what happens if something else, if you're not qualified to actually operate a taxi with people, right? So if something bad happens and you're not legally allowed to actually transport people, you are in the wrong.
We appreciate your thoughts on this matter. I want to go straight to our digital audience, get their questions for our guests. Let's go to Cornelia Mkize first. Cornelia, your question?
Thank you for having me tonight, Dave. I think looking at the recent Durban Texas strike, it kind of underscored a huge critical governance dilemma. So on top of the issues that the taxi industry already had, violence amongst them, violence against commuters, and looking at how the taxes got imposed because of no permits were there to show, the illegal documentation or no documentation to show at all. So now it becomes an issue, and it's very saddening, because now my core question is, how do we move this taxi industry from being an informal and self-regulated system that largely operates outside effective regulation and accountability? And linked to that as well, if the e-hailing and buses are seen as threats, because we've seen, the violence between the two, what policy instruments could encourage coexistence rather than confrontation, include in between these industries? Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Cornelia. Let's go to Mandla. Mandla, let me throw that to you.
Thank you. Look, first of all, there is absolutely no need for confrontation between these various modes of transport. In fact, we should coexist, and we have coexisted in the past. I mean, there's always been buses, there's always been trains, there's always been metered taxis, and there's always been minibus taxis, and these have always coexisted. It's just the fact that technology then has disrupted that coexistence and then disrupted the metered taxi market, and then obviously opening floodgates, because now you've got thousands and thousands of these e-hailing operators.
Right.
All that is needed is for this to be managed, but we have to coexist. There's a very...
Let me just pause you there,
role.
Mandla. I apologize for interjecting, but I just want to get a sense, because we spoke about this, these tech disruptions, right? And how we can get ahead of this. How better can this be managed? In your point of view, because these are going to happen constantly, and it's not only going to happen in the transport industry, it's across the board. All industries are likely to face such tech disruptions. How best can we manage it from your point of view?
Look, what is important is for us to embrace technology, first of all, as the minibus taxi industry, and run our operations efficiently, but also government must also step in. There's a need for government to protect local industries. This has happened in other countries where governments have said, actually, we don't even want Uber here, to protect the local taxi operators in those countries. We're saying if we are able to manage so that it's not an influx of these vehicles, and then the embracing technology, to be able to understand where our lucrative routes are, where we are not making money, and also to manage the numbers of vehicles that we have on the road. I don't necessarily believe that if there are 280,000 minibus taxis, I doubt if there's actually a need for that huge amount of taxis, and that works against us as well.
Vhatuka, you know, everybody here, we're having a mature conversation. Everybody's saying the right things. But what is happening on the ground that is giving rise to this animus between, perceived animus, I must say, between taxi operators and e-hailing operators? What is the issues on the ground?
The sticking issues on the ground are simply that there's no controls. We don't know who's participating. We can't fully identify everybody. There's vast amounts of criminality. Blaine, if I may, I think really, as I keep saying, we need to completely reimagine transportation. But as we completely reimagine it, we also need to begin to ask ourselves, what regulates, or what are the regulatory frameworks for Uber and Bolt? Because we seem to treat them like they can't be regulated. You understand, Starlink couldn't come into the country. Elon threw a tantrum all over the world. Who are the BE partners for Uber and Bolt? Because they've seemed to come into the country. You understand? How is it that in a country where we are so overly taxed as the middle class, we're excessively taxed, a government that was about to raise VAT by another 2%, but Uber gets to bank overseas and send money into the country on Sunday only? What are they collecting from tax? What are they collecting from VAT? You understand?
Right.
And in order for us to really then reconfigure these relationships, we therefore need legacy organizations like SANTACO and NTA to also reimagine themselves, because when they were formed, these tech disruptions went in place.
Right.
And right now we need them to embrace us so we can work together and reimagine how these organizations function.
Collen, full transparency within the industry seemingly is a hot point of discussion. But something that will help transparency is also having data for planning purposes. Are we failing in that regard?
Well, let me say that that's the reason why I guess we're here, to speak about the regulations that are going to come into play. And I think we should have started there to say, what are the regulations saying? Basically, what we are saying is that we need to introduce the operating licenses, 1. 2, your car must be roadworthy. 3, the apps that are being used must be registered with the regulators. If it's not registered, then you are an illegal operator. Then 4, the cars, the e-hailing operators must brand their vehicles so that we are able to see, as he has said, you don't know who's who in the zoo. Should be branded so that we are able to see that this is an e-hailing vehicle. And I think the last point, which is very, very important, is the issue of safety. We've said, let's have panic buttons in the vehicles.
In all vehicles, standard?
Standard. The safety of the driver and the passengers. I mean, the drivers have been killed. We should be able to raise alarm when we are under attack. So those are the things that are coming with the regulations. So the issues, as I said, it's not just about demarcating the area, as you were saying. It's also about how do we just regulate the whole industry. I mean, it's raising the issue of the BEE partners and so forth. I think the DTIC should have been here, because when it comes to issues of companies, they have the authority, they are the custodians of those kind of laws, so they should be able to speak on that.
We will try to follow up with the relevant stakeholders as well. Let me go to our digital audience in Tatua. Let me hear from you, then Howard.
My question is, are taxi operators trained or capacitated to work with the commuters to ensure their safety and that they are treated in a humanly manner? Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think I understand what your question is. I'll put it to Theo. Howard?
Yes, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yes. Actually, my take on this is that in as much as we are advancing in terms of technology and accepting that the both industries in terms of transportation, they must coexist, the Uber guys as well as the taxi operators. At the end of the day, the customer will be having a choice to choose which particular mode of transportation they're going to choose. And as we can see today, the customers are leaning more towards the Uber guys. And of course, this is why the gentleman earlier said that there's 40% of loss in the market for transportation. The question that I'm really trying to pose is that what is the taxi operators doing to better their service to the customers? Because at the end of the day, whether it's Uber today or another company in the upcoming 5 years that's going to revolutionize this transportation service, we're going to still find the same situation, whether with taxis or with buses. So the question is, what are the taxi operators doing to ensure that the service that they're offering to the customers is better than it was in 20 years' time? Is there a change that has been there since ever 1994, if I may put a reference to that, to the service that taxi operator has been giving to the customer? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Howard. I think your question also ties up nicely with Ntatua's question as well. Let me hear from Lungile and then we'll get some answers.
Thank you, Herman, and also to the viewers at home. Yeah, it's a matter of fact that we are within the fourth industrial revolution. So as a matter of fact, the competition is booming. So I think all the spheres of government, they need to intervene in order to regulate. Also, if you can remember, 2019, 2020, there was a commission of inquiry into taxi violence chaired by Justice Jeremiah Shongwe. If you check the findings and the recommendation, they have also alluded to the issue of regulating the industry in order to maintain peace and order. So the question which I would also like to pose is how those industries are going to ensure that people who are willing to use it will be safe in order for them to utilize it on a daily basis.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Theo, let me just throw the first one to you, and it's twofold. I guess what Ntatua was saying is in terms of conduct of taxi operators, and thereby linking to a better service for the end user, which is the important part here. How best can we change that?
Yeah, you see, basically each and every association has a constitution, and that constitution is formed by, it's actually been extrapolated from the National Land Transport Act, number 5 of 2009. It has a code of conduct for drivers and a code of conduct for operators, which are owners of the taxi industry. Now, it is up to each and every taxi operator who has the responsibility of hiring a driver to engage their drivers on a one-on-one basis. It is unfortunate that we cannot champion that by saying, indeed, we all do that, in fairness. I may very well articulate that to my drivers, but not each and every operator may perhaps have the same skill and capacity to, give those kind of outputs.
Do you think
to
that
the driver.
that segment of the conduct, of the service rather, is taken seriously?
Yes, look, it is a serious thing in that we have disciplinary committees within each and every taxi association. And their primary work is also to look at the customer complaints. We do get complaints from passengers, on a daily basis, and all these complaints are being referred to the disciplinary committees, who then see to it that they actually discipline the drivers for their misdemeanors.
Right. Mandla, how best can we monitor this? Because it seems to be a sticky point, especially among commuters.
Absolutely. One of the challenges that we are sitting with, when you employ a driver, your only way of measuring if that driver is fit and proper to drive your vehicle is if the driver has a license and a PRDP, and that's it. And what we are advocating for is some sort of training that must accompany your driver's license, so that if you are going to drive a taxi, then you must undergo some form of training. And as Mr. Mlalazi has indicated, not every operator would be able to do that due to capacity. So again, this is where SANTACO together with government can come together and have a training program for anyone who wants to be a taxi driver, so that it's professionalized. And then, because then you'd be able to deal with issues of customer service, because these drivers are actually at the coal face. They are the link between us and the passengers. So we need to spend more time training them, in fact. And so far, I think we have failed in that regard, even though there have been programs. There was one here in the Western Cape and one in KZN. In KZN, I think it's Moja Cruz, and here it was Blue Dot. And participating in that, there was training that was given to drivers, and they would get certificate, and then they would be accredited and registered. I think if we go that route, then we'll be able to deal with the issue of customer service and how our drivers relate to our customers.
Theo, I know you want to jump in.
Yes, I want to jump in about the PRDP, the professional driving permit. There's nothing professional about it. So authorities must look into this aspect, because all that you do, you go in there for your eye checkup and you check your criminal records, and that's all. So what's professional about it? There's nothing to it.
Collen, do we need to re-look at, what Mandla is putting forward? Can government step in? Are they willing to come in and train and maybe change certain codes of the license in order to make it more holistic?
Well, there is TITA, I don't know if you know, Transport Education and Training Authority, whose mandate was ready to provide training. I think at some point, in fact, around 2008, we had undertaken to work together with the taxi industry, if you remember correctly. So I think we've got that kind of the entity that could assist in this particular regard. But it is in the discussions with the taxi industry where such a need needs to be identified, as they are saying, and raise it, so that that particular matter, we would need to find out what exactly happened, because it was starting to happen, and to professionalize the industry itself. And I think it was also part of the Taxi Lekgotla resolution to say we need to professionalize.
But there is seemingly a need for it. Can't we move on it? It goes back to the issue of being proactive. Can't we move on this?
Look, we're dealing with a lot of, there might be some movements already. It's just that some of these things one would have to go back and check what exactly is happening in that area. But I don't have the information right now with me in terms of how far we are with
Just a quick one. I think for us to be able to can resolve the challenges within public transport is for the Department of Transport to stop discriminating against the taxi industry, treating other associations as if they are statutory bodies. We are all equal. We should be treated equally. And once that can be achieved, all these challenges can be nullified. Now, for the fact that the playing fields are lopsided, you will always find these problems.
Collen, your response?
It's above my pay grade, but I do want to say, look, the SANTACO is there. I mean, it is the body that was introduced so that it can represent the whole taxi industry. And I think that's basically Mandla can attest to that. But I don't want to get into the details of what then happens thereafter.
But maybe we need to talk about that.
That's why I'm saying it's above my pay grade.
Okay. Then we've got to reimagine transport.
Go on.
We've got to reimagine transport.
But maybe that's one of the ways to reimagine transport, right?
We've got to reimagine transport.
Yeah.
And the problem at hand is that, no disrespect, we've had too many old men with no ideas in charge. And it's time they step aside. And we need a leadership that needs to understand that we can't act in silos. Government can't act in silos. We've got to bring everybody together. I myself have sat with Tita. I know the training programs are in place. I don't need to find out. I can confirm that they are there, sir. I myself have sat with SANTACO. I can confirm the appetite to engage is in place. I myself have sat with NTA. The appetite is there. Now, what we need is political will to rein in the thugs of the day. And that is Uber and Bolt. They are loyal to themselves. They are undermining our transportation sector. And the man whose pay grade doesn't allow him to speak on it needs to get us an answer as to why his department, the national department, doesn't have the backbone to take a stand and put these organizations in their place. This is South Africa. We are the custodians of industry. We can't continue to behave like we must beg Uber, like we can't deploy that technology. We can't continue to ignore the local apps that South Africans have developed and want to participate, but the business environment is not enabling it. We can't abdicate the seat of responsibility anymore. We need to understand why there's no political will to drive our agendas.
Look, it's unfortunate we don't have Uber and Bolt here, but we definitely endeavor to follow up and get some responses. Collen, you want to respond in terms of your engagements with such company?
Well, just to say, look, I think the fears about illegal operators from the e-hailing service, I do want to say those who are operating illegally, the regulations, they come with a very hefty fine. If you are found to be operating illegally, it's 100,000 or certain, I think it's 2 years in jail. So I think that would deter some of these illegal operations. But one thing that I left out, part of what needs to happen as part of the regulations is that when you have the app must have the picture of the driver, and including the details of the vehicle that is coming to pick you up. So that we are able to say the driver is actually the person who is on the app, and the vehicle is the one that corresponds. So that we deal with issues of safety. But I must say, issues of illegal operations, we are dealing with it in terms of finding and impounding vehicles.
Right. Mandla, last word to you on the way forward.
It's important that we should all sit together and engage on these things. There's a lot of work that we have been doing in various provinces, and it's a matter of putting everything together and saying which one works best. I mean, in terms of apps, there are a whole lot of companies, local companies, that have come forward with apps that would assist us as we embrace technology to manage our operations and how we plug in terms of your Ubers and e-hailing. So all is important, really, it's a political will to do it.
Mandla, thank you very much indeed. Gentlemen, appreciate your time. It's an ongoing conversation. I guess once the regulations kick in, we need to monitor it closely and pick up the gaps where we can fill it in as well. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Also, our digital audience, appreciate your time. Value added, no doubt. All right, before we go, here's my take. Look, competition can be good for business, right? It spurs innovation. It encourages efficiency. And it can be really good for the end user, which in this case, our commuters. It could lead to an improvement in service quality. But this can only be done in a safe environment. If you have an unbalanced regulatory environment, that creates problems. How do we even out the playing field? How urgent is it? The need to formalize the taxi industry and make it operate under normal competitive business practices. Once again, it calls for a collective effort. government and the various industry stakeholders working together to find solutions to these pressing problems. Why? Because only when we all are in do we win. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube as well as SABC Plus. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Unwrap Africa up next. Also, a brand new program on a Sunday night. It's called G20 Focus. Thulasizwe Semelani brings you an hour-long, insightful, in-depth and thought-provoking discussion program that interrogates world leaders and thinkers about the undercurrents of the G20 issues. And you know Thulas brings it, right? So don't miss that. 8:30 tonight. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, enjoy the blood moon on your screen now. Keep it locked on to SABC News. Take care. Bye-bye.